video meeting room called Adobe Connect to do a audio, to do raw MacFadden presentation. So let me just show you how this works, because I think it's a good alternative to PowerPoint.
What's the title? What's the program?
This is Prezi, Prezi.com. It's a free website. It's all online. There's nothing, you can download something, but it's mostly online. Now, I'll walk through our presentation very quickly, and then you'll see it in the actual video. So now we can, where's our technician to bring the video up? Again, this is using Adobe Connect.
Hi, I'm Rob MacFadden from the University of Toronto, with Schoech from the University of Texas at Arlington. And today we're pleased to present a presentation called Using ICT to Probe the Unconscious, Neuroscience and Professional Decision Making. Next.
Hi, Rob. I'd like to introduce what human services traditionally think of in terms of decision making. It's typically the evidence-based practice model that suggests rationality should control the emotions. That professional decision-making is cool, calculated, explicit, and explainable. And that this evidence-based practice form of decision-making, this professional decision-making, is preferred over other models of decision-making, and that information technology should support professional decision-making. So this is the model that we're typically used to in human services.
Thanks, Dick. This in front of you is a picture of the brain, which I assume most of you recognize. And we're going to talk a little bit about the conscious and unconscious processes, or what's called implicit, unconscious, and explicit conscious. You see the components there of the brain that's engaged in what I'm talking about. And we're going to describe two processes. One is the low road, the other is the high road. Next. Okay, the brain has conscious and unconscious ways of processing. In fact, some research is saying that most of our mental processes, in the 90%, is essentially unconscious or implicit. So, in a fear situation, as an example, the sensory information, visual, audio, and other forms, flow into the thalamus, and then the thalamus shunts this information into two directions. Next. Now, the process called the low road is where the thalamus directly and swiftly sends this information to the amygdala. And if the amygdala perceives this information as a threat or as unknown, it sets off an alarm reaction immediately as we prepare to freeze or flee. This whole process is incredibly instantaneous and it's unconscious. Next. Meanwhile, the thalamus at the same time also sends the same information to the cortex, which engages memory, thought, and then decides upon a reaction. And this is the conscious form that is called the high road. Next. Now, what neuroscience is telling us is that most decision-making is largely unconscious or implicit. Emotions are neurologically marked knowledge, experiences, based on whether they support or inhibit survival. This is all happens through the implicit mental processing system. And these are the values that provide the basis of decision-making. Our brains store much knowledge, biases, and experience, which we use unconsciously to make decisions rapidly. Now, some of this knowledge and bias is inaccurate and may reflect prejudices, stereotypes that we consciously don't know we hold. And this implicit knowledge is extremely powerful, automatic, unconscious, and difficult to change. Next. Okay, part of professional decision-making can be based on these biases without the professional being aware. Researchers, for instance, through the University of Washington and Harvard, have developed the implicit association test, which identifies some of these biases. These are just examples: race, skin color, weight, and several others, including the direction, meaning for or against, and also the degree of which they're held. Now, this implicit association test uses ICT to create a system to interrogate unconscious beliefs, and we've given you a reference to that, along with a journal article that talks about the pros and the cons and the issues related to validity and methodology. So I believe that professionals need awareness of these implicit biases in order to make fair and accurate decisions. An example of this would be a child protection worker who is charged with making a decision about whether a same-sex couple would be a good family to adopt. If the worker had implicit beliefs about the inadequacy, for instance, of lesbians to raise children, this could color what the worker sees, it could color the questions they ask, and the final decision. Even with formal decision-making frameworks, there's usually some degree of discretion which could influence the fairness of the decision-making. Now, what we're suggesting is that this use of the IAT and ICT would need to be in the context of professional self-reflection and be kept extremely confidential to the professional. But it could be a useful way to identify various kinds of biases that really may have a significant effect on what one sees and decisions one makes. Dick?
Okay, I'd like to move into ICT implications for the information that Rob has just presented. One of the things that we typically talk about, and in Texas we're into having caseworkers take tablets into the field and try to do their case recordings and try to do their assessment in the field. Based upon how the brain works, it may not be that great of an idea to have workers doing their assessment in the hot environment of the investigation. Rather, we're suggesting that it may be better that the worker is in the cool office environment where both the emotional and the cognitive brain can work together. So that's really what you're trying to do in decision making, is trying to get both parts of the brain to work together to come up with a better decision, rather than the emotional brain or the implicit processing taking over, or the explicit processing taking over. The second implication that we thought of for ICT has to do with using virtual reality to simulate some of the hot situations that workers find themselves in. For example, a worker being in a neighborhood of an unfamiliar ethnic group, and that brings on the fear reaction, that brings on a lot of the emotional brain, the implicit brain functioning, and that really needs to be tempered, or the worker really needs to sort of be able to see how that emotional brain is allowing their cognitive processing, influencing their cognitive processing. So virtual reality could do some simulations where the emotional stimulus could be presented, and also the monitoring could present what's exactly happening, and as they sort of process through and as they get different information through the virtual reality goggles. The third implication has to do with the framing of decisions. A lot of times we talk about risk assessment, and an application will come up, this is your risk assessment system. Just putting the words risk assessment system causes the emotional part of the brain to get into that fear. The amygdala sort of sends some stimulations to different parts of the body and sort of heightens your fear reaction, rather than having a sort of a emotional neutral wording, sort of like a just client assessment. And you want an emotional neutral so the worker can look at all the different goals which they have in a case. For example, not only assessing risk, but assessing safety, permanence, family stability, etc. And the last implication is that checklists are an easy way to help sort of balance the emotional part of the brain, to get at some of the checklists that cause us to think rationally, help us to really put a check on the emotional brain. So Rob, do you have any final comments that you want to make?
I can see that neuroscience is really opening up the idea about how we think and how we feel, and how the feelings, the emotions, are actually absolutely a critical part of how we think and how we make good decisions. So I think in the next number of years, understanding how the emotions relate to rationality and our need to understand the idea that the body and the brain are intricately tied together is going to really help us to see things in very different ways. So I'm excited about that. This is just a beginning, and we'd like to sort of see how we might be able to apply this kind of thing to some very important professional decisions.
Okay. Well, we want to thank everyone, and
Thank you.
we want to make sure everyone has fun in Hong Kong.
And good luck with your conference.
Okay, we still have a few minutes to, so from the floor, any comments, questions on Grace?
Yes, Paul.
Dick, it sounds like a great research project there in that first implications for ICT. Have you got any plans for comparing those two situations where workers on the one hand would be entering their notes on their laptop or whatever while they're in the field, and others would be doing it after they return to the office?
We haven't really gone any further than talking about this, but that is a big issue. In Texas, they provided tablets to all the CPS workers in Texas. So they take their tablet, and the state is encouraging them to go into the field with those tablets and to use the tablets in the field. And again, one of the things that we're pointing out is that that may really bias their decision making. That may cause worse decision making than if they come back to the office, where they can use their rational brain and the emotion to temper the emotional heightened awareness. Because when you go out on an investigation, especially when there's a removal, it can be a very challenging, emotional, a very adrenaline-based activity. So doing your risk assessment with that adrenaline flowing and with that part of the brain just highly stimulated could really bias the assessment a lot. So I think that research really needs to be done.
Any other questions or comments? If not, thanks. Thanks, I think. So we have a last presentation from Jackie, and she's Director, Center of Human Service Technology at University of Suffolk.
The Scottish ballad, I'll never hear the same again. The lines go, I'll take the high road and you take the low road. Good now. Had to change of meaning. Thanks for staying this long. I have done 10 handouts because I thought that's what we would have left by Sunday afternoon, the last presentation. So I can put this on a web page where you can get hold of it if you like the handouts. But you'll see the handouts don't necessarily give you the whole story. I realised when I started the PowerPoint and when I used this can of worms, that can of worms metaphor doesn't necessarily travel. And I thought I'd better start off by explaining what a can of worms symbolises. And in fact, it's not even my can of worms, it's actually Jan Steyaert from Eindhoven University, Pontius University in Eindhoven's can of worms, which he used last year in a seminar. Well, maybe it's a different can of worms, but it's actually his idea. A can of worms definition is around, I think it's actually, looking up the research on it, it is disputed, the definition or the origin of a can of worms metaphor. It's believed to come from the States, from fishermen who would go to a bait store and buy a can of worms. And that's fine, you can control that kind of flow. You take it to the river bank, and you open the can,